this series. And today I'm going to be doing a talk based on a talk I did a while ago when I was invited to do an interfaith talk. And the topic was love. And immediately to mind came one of the most famous verses out there, or one of the famous stories from the Christian scriptures. And it's the one where Jesus is questioned as to what are the greatest commandments, or what are the commandments that we should follow. Again, here is Jesus in more modern time. And as I always say, when something's repeated over and over again, it's something you want to pay attention to. So the story is actually repeated 3 times. Matthew 22:35 through 40, Mark 12:28 through 31, and Luke 10:25 through 28. Gospel of Mark has been dated as as the first gospel to be written, and clearly taps into the Hebrew scriptures. So when Jesus talked, we have to remember that he was a Jewish man. So he spoke from the Torah, or the Hebrew scriptures. So from the Gospel of Mark, we hear, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Jesus, which commandment in the law is the greatest? He said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the laws and the prophets. Gospel of Luke does exactly the same thing. It says, just as the lawyer stood up to test Jesus, Jesus said, what must I do to inherit the eternal life? He said unto him, what is written in the law? And of course, in the law, he's talking about the Torah. It says, what do you read there? He answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to them, you have given the right answer. To do this, you will live. Mark takes more of the traditional language, and it says, one of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another. Seeing that he answered them well, he asked them, which commandment is the first of all? Jesus answered, the first is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's no other commandment greater than these. So again, we've got to repeat it 3 times through our Gospels. And he keeps talking about the 2 commandments. And yes, I'm keeping you in suspense because you know that the title is the 3rd greatest commandment. But I wanted to touch on, because again, it does repeat as we go into the Hebrew scriptures. We know that Jesus is quoting Leviticus 19:18. It says, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Lord. And this, of course, as I said, Leviticus 19:18. And from Deuteronomy, he quotes, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Again, Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 5, which you hear closer in the Gospel of Mark. So he continues to talk about 2 great commandments. So the trip I'm going to take you on now is, I promise you that there's actually a 3rd greatest commandment. And that on top of that, when you study into the metaphysical meanings of this biblical verse, that 3rd commandment is actually embedded in the first one. So let's take it and break it down a little bit more. So we already know that he says the first of the greatest commandments is, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. But the 2nd greatest commandment says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now listen to that again carefully. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So for me, it hit me in an aha moment, and I'm sure this has been spoken about before. But sometimes, you know how it is, we don't always listen to the people that are talking to us, and it has to come to us in a spark of intuition or a spark of inspiration. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Let's add a word to that. You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. So the 3rd greatest commandment, and one of the challenges that I see constantly in all age groups, whether you're an older person, whether you're in middle age as I am, whether you're a young adult, whether you're a teenager, is that third greatest commandment to love yourself. Because we need to understand that unless we understand how to love ourselves, how do we love our neighbor? And in the same motion, if you think about it, if we are hating on ourselves, if we do what seems to be the normal, which is we put ourselves down and we're constantly hating things about ourselves, and the commandment says to love your neighbor as you love yourself, could this explain a lot of what we would call haters in the world? Because they only know how to react to the people around them based on the hate they give themselves. So I have a quick story here that I think works well with this. And it goes around, especially in these times that we talk about racial equality. We talk about equality with the LGBTQ AI community. We talk about, just within our own families and our friends, how we judge. And anger. So let's take a quick look at this. So imagine you're hungry, very, very hungry. You have $5 to your name, and you have a $5 bill laying on your kitchen counter to go to the store to buy a loaf of bread. You go into your bedroom to put on your shoes, and while you're there, someone sneaks into your house and steals your $5. Oh my, my, my! I suspect how angry you would be. Really, really angry. Run after the thief, call the police outraged, understandably so. We know that we have the scenario. You're very hungry, you have your last $5 is sitting on your kitchen table, and someone snuck in and took that $5. Now let's look at that again. Let's say that this time you're still hungry, very, very hungry. You have your $5 bill laying on your kitchen counter to go to the store to buy a loaf of bread. You go into the bedroom, you put on your shoes, and while you're there, someone sneaks into the house and steals your $5. But this time, you have $5 million tucked away in your house. How angry are you now? I'm pretty sure not as much. In fact, you may have some compassion for the poor person who took the $5. You may think he or she is pretty desperate, right, to steal a measly $5. You wish you would have known, you would have given them even more, wouldn't you? So nothing has changed about what happened. The thing that made you so angry in the first situation is the same thing in the second situation, but you reacted completely differently. And why? Because in the first scenario, you had very little of what you needed very badly. And in the second, you had lots and lots and lots of it. Now, this parable isn't about money. Parables never are what they actually are about at the surface. But rather, my friends, it is love. The one thing we need to have lots and lots and lots of. And when we feel sufficient love, true, real, unconditional love, our anger response is dialed way, way down. Now, I found that in my own self, where I used to hate on pretty much everything. Being a big guy, the ridicule from high school till now, people making comments, making suggestions, and the problem was that I also understood that I was allowing these things to enter into my mind, into my subconscious mind. And that's for which the filter is when we hear things that bring up or trigger anger, or trigger fear, or trigger sadness or depression. Usually is because we've been pre-programmed to believe these things about ourselves. But when we love on ourselves, when we begin to look at ourselves in a different light, we begin to understand how to love ourselves. And when we're compassionate with ourselves, when we learn to truly love and be compassionate and empathize with ourselves, it becomes that much easier to empathize with our neighbors. When we see them going through things, we truly understand empathy. In fact, as a call center manager at one point and a trainer, I used to put in that section of empathy versus sympathy into our training. And why? Because we needed to understand what the difference was. So I used to teach my agents that when you told somebody, I'm sorry for what happened, you're basically saying it sucks to be you, but I'm good. But when you empathize, you're actually putting yourselves in that person's situation. And even if you can't understand it, even if you can't truly understand what they went through, you can always say, hey, I am not understanding. I don't understand, but I'm here for you. But imagine if you can empathize with that person and say, hey, I understand what you've gone through, and maybe share a story with them, such as what I do when we talk. Then the difference changes. And when you begin to practice that, especially with yourself, you begin to make it easier to love your neighbor. So loving yourself has to be the third greatest commandment. In John 7:24, Jesus says, do not judge by outward appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. So as you know, in Unity, we teach 12 powers of man, or the 12 innate powers that we all have, to allow us to get to that highest level of ourselves, or as we call the Christ consciousness. So in the 12 powers, judgment, the word can also be changed to wisdom. So what if we change that when we judge ourselves to the word wisdom? So do not judge by outward appearance. So let's put away what people tell us we're supposed to be. Let's put away the social media aspect that we get. In fact, today I was reading an article where the big social media moguls know that Instagram has caused a lot of our teenagers to truly suffer from body shaming because of how Instagram portrays many people, or how people portray themselves on Instagram. But of course, we won't do anything about it other than that we can teach ourselves to know the difference to what is real and what is not. So when we let go of those outer appearances and judge from a place of wisdom, knowing who we truly are, that's where we begin to really bridge to that love for ourselves. So again, another of the 12 powers is love. So I'm taking this from Charles Fillmore's revealing word. And love is the pure essence of being that brings together the whole human family. Of all the attributes of God, love is undoubtedly the most beautiful. In divine mind, love is the power that joins and binds in divine harmony the universe and everything in it, the great harmonizing principle known to man. So when we think about this, we think about that energy within ourselves. When we think about loving ourselves, that power of love, not the emotion, but the power of love that's already innate inside us, binds us to the best person we can be. And when we begin to see ourselves in that light, how much easier is it to be with our brothers and sisters out there? Love is an inner quality that sees good everywhere and in everybody. It insists that all is good, and by refusing to see anything but good, causes the quality finally to appear upmost in itself and in all things. So exactly what I've been saying. Love is that part that binds us. So when I love me, I love you. When I understand what loving me means, I understand what loving you means, no matter what outer appearances may be there. Let's look at wisdom. So intuitive knowing, spiritual intuition, the voice of God within as a source of our understanding, mental action based on the Christ truth within. Wisdom includes judgment, discrimination, intuition, and all departments of mind that come under the head of knowing. This knowing capacity transcends intellectual knowledge. Spiritual discernment always places wisdom above other faculties of the mind and reveals that knowledge and intelligence are auxiliary to understanding. Again, definition comes from The Revealing Word by Charles Fillmore. But it's understanding, and like any time, and again, I'm not going to dive too much into this because this would be more of a 12 powers training. There's always a good and bad side, an underdeveloped and overdeveloped way to express the 12 powers. And as here, we have judgment or wisdom versus discrimination. So usually when we ask ourselves, why is that person angry? Why we see in that person that's making me angry? I have to turn that around and say, what inside of me, or what is it that I see in them that's actually in me that's causing me to be angry? So today, our message is literally that. I want you to begin to look inside of yourselves. We talked about it during the Badass series, is tapping into the mother lode. And in this case, we're talking about the mother lode of love. There's love all around us. But most importantly, it must start within ourselves. And just for a metaphysical twist, let's take that first commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. When we look at the metaphysical meaning of the word Lord, it actually represents the I am, that Christ center within you, that good within you. And if we replace God, when we say God the good, we replace God with good. Let's reread that line. You shall love the divinity within yourselves, the good within yourselves, or the divinity, your good, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. The message is very clear there. And today I want to leave you with that, because our last talks challenged you if you really did the work. And I guarantee you, because I've been down this road, when things start working out for you, when you start to push those comfort levels, when you start reaching for those things you never thought you could reach for before, you begin that doubt. Your ego starts to try to protect you by running you back to your comfort zone. And you start to should on yourself. You start to beat yourself up because you don't realize that you can fail forward. So this needs to transcend all of that. And it is working within and working those principles, working the unity principles, working the 12 powers, just working with intuition in general, and being gentle with yourself and loving on yourself is the most important part before we can step out and serve to change the world. So with that, I will leave you here. I know it's a lot of heavy stuff, and I want you to truly internalize it this week. And as always, join us Monday for our Meditation Monday. Next week for our next Wisdom Wednesday. If you're on YouTube, please like, share, and make sure you hit the small bell so that you know when another video drops. And as well as if you're listening to this on a podcast, that you subscribe to the podcast so you know when another episode drops. And I am so grateful for being here with you today. And if no one else has told you, I love you. And there's nothing you can do about it. So there's that love again. And with that, I bid you namaste, as the big, beautiful divinity in me sees that big and beautiful divinity in you. Let's have a wonderful week, and I will see you on Monday.